lecture. I'm going to take the presenter for a second, Greg, because I want to share my own screen. Share your screen, share. Okay, so you should see something. GitHub, systems development frameworks. There's a new homework. Exercise 8, the last one for the entire course. You can find it on branch main, and there's exercise 8. It's only 1 week, and it's small, and you have, again, different ways how to implement it. And the most interesting part and the most relevant part here is that that is Yuri and I, have decided that there's no connection to the previous exercises unless you want to. So you don't have to necessarily extend exercises 1 to 7, of course, if you can do it, right? So this is optional. If you want, you can do that. And the learning goal here is to learn a little bit about layouting, something that you saw last lecture, that you have, I don't know, content, and the content appears differently depending on the device. So layouting versus responsiveness. And another thing is, but this is also one of the optional tasks, is to implement this sidebar here, which would pop up. So all you have to do is basically create this header, which is this one. And yeah, you have to show these links on desktop and show this button on mobile. That's it already. And then the grid in the center, like in the section, in the content section, right? That's it. Maybe, and yeah, and add the footer. And if you want, you have optional objectives. That is, you can extend the previous exercises. You can, again, request and review another teams. This is also optional this time. If you want, you can use BAM or RCSS or something similar. And yeah, and the sidebar and semantic HTML. So any questions regarding this homework here? Oh, Yuri, is there something I should add? Yeah, it's up to you how you want to implement it. Last lecture, I was showing you the approach without any framework, which I think is best for educational purposes. The quickest solution, I guess, is Vuetify. And what we are going to cover in this lecture today is how you can do this in Tailwind. Yeah, so that's it regarding the exercise. Any questions in the chat, Yuri? Can you have a look? If not, then this was part 1 out of 2. And I wanted to show you something. I wasn't quite happy with my live demo last time because I was quite confused. So I'm taking my time to show you what I did wrong. I mean, I'm not a skilled front-end developer yet. I'm also like learning. And wow, what's going on? What I was quite unhappy about last lecture is that, first of all, I was confused because I was showing you a grid without explicitly naming how many columns I have. So we had this media query, if you remember, but I was confused because I didn't mention how many columns we have. Okay, it's still building. Yeah, so before you can see anything, I'm going to talk about the code. So this is like a shorthand in CSS Grid to create two-row grids. So this is the number of rows. This is number of columns. This means the second row can expand as much as it's possible. Like this means 1 fraction, and auto means take as much space as you minimally need. And this is like in the media query for small devices, whereas for large devices, we have just template rows. So we have just 3 rows, which kind of resembles what you can see here, right? So inside one item, we have one column layout and with 4 rows, image, header, text, button. And here we have 2 columns. Basically, we have 2 columns with 2 rows because this is now in a row. No, this is 1 row and the text and the button is 1 row. And the image spans 2 rows, but it's on the left side of the column. Okay. Now we should see something. Yeah, there we go. And you can check out the grid here. So you can click on grid, and there you can see how many columns and how many rows we have. And you see also the gap between column and rows. That's the, I don't know, violet or purple area. Can you see that? Yuri, can you see that? Great. So that's number 1. And the other thing is I wasn't quite happy about how I implemented the transitions. I'm talking about the transition for the sidebar. So when I click on menu, I was quite confused how I implemented this because it wasn't my code, to be honest. Like I took it from somewhere and didn't really understand what was going on. And now I took my time to implement it according to the Vue.js tutorial, how to implement transitions, right? So here we have Vue.js transitions. And there you have transitions with translate. There you go. So yeah, Vue.js just gives you these CSS classes. It has a name for the transition, which is slide fade. And because it's called slide fade, you get these CSS classes. Slide fade enter active, slide leave active, and then enter and leave 2. This refers to the CSS class that this element is getting during the transition. And that's the great way of explaining how long a transition should take. And enter is when the transition starts, and leave 2 is after the transition has ended. So that's the first frame, let's say, and that's like the last frame. So they are reusing the same position for entering and leaving the transition. So it's from like 10 pixels in the x-axis translated, right? Yeah, so they have different times for entering and leave transition, but this thing here is being moved 10 pixels to the right, which you can see here, right? So, and I was in my live demo last week, I was using something like margin, which doesn't make too much sense. I hope this explains this a little bit better. We can also inspect this. So just to recap, it's adding those classes. So watch out for the CSS classes that are being added. Hopefully it's not too quick to see. Yuri, can you tell me if you can see some classes being added there? Okay, and these are these classes. And yeah. Just check it out. You have, yeah, this is actually quite a good explanation. So you have one frame v-enter when it begins, and the last frame would be enter 2. The whole duration is enter active. And then you have the leave transition. Again, v-leave is, so the v is for the name of the transition. That would be slide fade here. So slide fade leave. Then for the whole transition, slide fade leave active. And then the last frame would be leave 2. And that's why they have here and here the translation of 10 pixels to the right, because it's like coming from the right and then leaving to the right. Right? It's coming from here, leaving there. And I use the very same technique for my for my mobile sidebar here. So I told it it should be at position. So let's have a look. Page header. We have, I have a component for this now. So I also refactored this to become like its own component. I have the sidebar, and I call the transition slide in. And that's why I have slide in CSS classes, slide in enter, slide in leave to. Here I say translate AT viewpoint width. So it should translate AT viewpoint width outside its like default position. And because the default position is 20 viewpoint width, 20 plus 80 is 100 viewpoint width. So it's like outside of the screen. So when I click on it, it's first outside of the screen and then translates into the screen. Like this. And when I click on it, it's again moving outside of the screen, and then it's gone. Right? Because I say slide in enter, that's the first keyframe, that's the first frame of the first of the enter transition, and leave to is the last frame of the leave transition. And that's why I have to add transform translate there. Actually, I could even refactor this, I think, probably like this. Let's have a look if that still works. Nice, cool. And yeah, I just say it should take 1 second. And that's it, both for the interactive transition, so for the duration of the enter transition and for the duration of the leave transition, I have this CSS rule here, and I say it should take 1 second. So fairly easy, actually, if you think about it. Yeah, and I kind of messed that up last lecture, and I feel bad for it, and so I had the need of showing you this and fix my error. So that's 2 out of 2 what I have to say. Is there anyone who wants to give a lightning talk now or never? Like, this is like our last lecture before we have the exam preparation. And if you want to give a lightning talk, this would be it. This would be the moment. And do I see any chat messages? No, just one, and it says hallelujah. But apparently no one wants to give a lightning talk. So now I'm really excited and pleased to give the word to my dear friend Greg, who is a much more experienced front-end developer, and and is better in explaining all these things. And yeah, Greg, very welcome to our lecture. Stage is yours.
You are now muted.
Yeah, Robert, thanks for inviting me. I don't know if I can explain it better, but I will try. Wait, I want to share my screen. Yeah. So, can you see the slide?
Yeah, now I can see the slide.
Awesome. So today we are talking about Tailwind CSS, utility-first CSS framework for rapid building custom designs. Yeah. First about me. Who's talking? I'm Grzegorz Schlauniec. No one can pronounce it correctly, so everyone calls me Greg. I'm a front-end developer. I'm basically a full-stack developer. I'm freelancing since 12 years, doing in the front-end mostly Vue.js, Nuxt.js, and Tailwind CSS. And in this combination, I can fly basically because it's so damn productive. I have an error in my slide, I see. I don't use Tailwind CSS in the backend, no. I use Node.js in the backend. Databases I use like MySQL, MongoDB, and Neo4j. So relational databases, document databases, and graph databases, depending on the case. Obviously, you already had graph database, I think. Robert, do you have?
You are now unmuted.
Yes, I'm sometimes muting myself
muted.
to
Yes.
reduce background noise. But yes, we had Neo4j, and yes, we even had a talk of William Lyon.
Yeah.
And maybe there's also some news. I posted in our forum, in our Moodle forum, so the students already know, but maybe you don't know. William Lyon announced there's like a rewrite of this Neo4j GraphQL.js library called @Neo4j/GraphQL. And they allocate more resources, more developers on it. It's rewritten with TypeScript and
Cool.
kind of learning from the old library. Yeah, you should really check it out.
That's really nice because it was a bit of a pain point in the past for us too. I think it was tested but not that pretty in between sometimes. But it's cool that they take the time now. Nice. Yeah, I also work on mobile apps, mostly with React Native until now, and now starting to use Flutter, which is a cross-platform UI or app library, which is very nice. And I also do DevOps, Docker, Kubernetes, and I don't write it here, but I'm also a UI UX designer. So I'm the full package basically. I don't like to stick in technologies or something. I just want to get full applications out. So that's why I'm doing all this stuff. Yeah. Tailwind CSS is a utility first CSS. Why or what is utility first CSS? Yeah, little quote. When you think about CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or Material UI, we think of them as a great tool to fasten our development speed. However, all these frameworks suffer from the same problem that they all look and feel the same. When you visit any of these sites, they look like an identical adoption of a popular base. So a lot of twins. When you have like Bootstrap, or every Bootstrap site looks like Bootstrap basically when you don't buy themes. And Material UI frameworks like Vuetify, for example, always look like Vuetify or like Material Design. So the approach of utility first CSS is to not give you like concrete implementations of components, but to give you atomic CSS styles. So you have styles that we will see a bit later that you can reuse. It's like Lego blocks that you put together instead of having stuff that is already designed in a specific way and you have to override it. This is not needed with Tailwind or other frameworks that use this approach. But as you will see, Tailwind CSS is the most used one. So Tailwind CSS. It's in this study or this questioning. Oh, well, in the poll. There's a poll every year at the state of CSS. And in 2019, Tailwind was known by 35% of the people that did the poll, and it was by far the most satisfying one. So 81% that tried Tailwind CSS stick with it. And yeah.
Greg, may I interrupt? Probably the students don't know the State of JavaScript survey. Do you want maybe to share a quick show us the website of the survey? Because I think it was published recently. I got a newsletter like 1 week ago, maybe. So I think most of the students don't know the survey exists. So this is CSS. Oh yeah, I checked out the JavaScript survey. Yeah, okay, now I'm confused. So
Yeah,
there's
I think
JavaScript instead of CSS.
no, I have the wrong link there. Yeah, you have this. This is from 2019. I put it there because I wanted to show the rise of Tailwind here, but you have already the new one out yet. I don't know where to see, but it's stateofcss.com, and there you can find a lot of interesting technologies. It's pretty cool, worth looking into it. So yeah, we have a lot of stuff here that you can go through. I don't know where CSS is right now. Anyway, you can look for yourself. So, and yeah, Tailwind has the most satisfaction in this field, and at least half of the people that took the survey are at least interested in this technology. But it's easier to show it in a demo, or at least to show a bit of on their site, because they have really awesome examples. So you have here a HTML block where you then add or sprinkle in this tiny utility CSS classes. And you can see what happens then. You have styles for text color, for background color, for border color,
now unmuted.
with awesome color schemes there.
Greg, may I interrupt again?
Yes.
We don't see your browser
now
window, I
muted.
think, or I don't see it. I see your
Why?
background, like your wallpaper. There we go. Now I see it.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know what you did, but now I can see the website.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
How does it look for you?
This is strange.
You are
What
now
it's
unmuted.
doing.
Yuri, can you? Yeah,
Wait.
now I see the slide.
I will do it again. I think there's a resolution issue between the presentation and the web browser. Yeah, now I look good. So thanks. So you see, you sprinkle in this styles one by one into the HTML structure, which at first, when you do CSS and the separation of concerns, you think, oh, I don't want to mix them both. But for there is no real separation of concerns when you so want to say this.
Greg, what is separation of concerns actually?
Yeah, separation of concerns is the idea of that the style, in this case, the styling should not be bound to the representation of the content of the HTML. But in practice, this is not really the case, because you start to style like avatar or and p tag or whatever, and there you have inside a p tag a paragraph. You have different elements or images under this class which you also style, and you also did, I think, something about the BAM methodology, I think.
Yes, that's right. So last lecture, I introduced BAM as one example out of many concepts or many rule sets, how you can avoid specificity wars.
Exactly.
Or specificity issues when you use global CSS. So different ways how to accomplish that. And I tried to explain in the lecture, at least, that there are many ways how to do this. And BAM is just one out of many. And you can also, for example, use scoped CSS. Yeah, but this kind of reflects what we were doing. Like, students are very familiar with single file components. So you put HTML, JavaScript, and CSS into one file, and it all belongs together. So the style belongs to the template and vice versa, and the JavaScript also belongs to the template. And this is contradictory to the idea of what you call separation of concerns, that style and HTML or and markup doesn't know anything about each other, like different philosophies.
Yeah, but in the last years, this approach of separating this, where you have like these big chunks of CSS and also a big chunk of HTML code. It went further, and we now have like components in Vue.js or React or whatever, and we started to put them together, the styles and the markup together in files. And for example, Vue.js have this how it's called, single file components, and you put them together because it makes sense. You don't have to search somewhere. Before there was no ability to separate them, but now we are used to it, and we started to with the years to put them together because it makes sense. So, but the issue is there. You have still global styles that bleed into components, and then you have to fight against it with overrides or importance or whatever in the worst case scenario. And this is hard. There's some way to do this in Vue. There are CSS modules or something. This is the scoping of CSS, where you prefix the styles that you specify in the components with prefix. Yeah. So you try to avoid bleeding CSS over the place all over.
By the way, I really love this term, bleeding. It's bleeding out.
Yeah.
I think we have to explain this a little bit. I think this refers to, I didn't bring this up, this word, bleeding, in the last lecture.
Yeah.
I just tried to explain it with my own words. Like you want to apply your rules to the template that you're like working on in this file, but what actually happens is you apply it globally by accident. And this is what it means, I guess. So you can... Okay. First of all, if you don't use scope CSS, then the CSS is global. So that's one thing. So if you apply it to a particular class or a particular element, then you actually apply it globally. And then if you try to fix that by, for example, assigning a class to your component and then nesting your CSS rules under this selector, this class selector, it still might happen that you apply your CSS rule to nested subcomponents of your component. The students already know how to nest components, and they are very familiar with that. And yeah, if you apply your CSS rule to your class and in the DOM and the HTML you render your subcomponents within the element, then of course you apply those CSS rules there. That's what's called bleeding, and there are different ways how to solve this problem.
Exactly. I have these issues with this screen sharing here all the time. I try again to just share my browser maybe. Now it's, I think, better. Yeah, exactly. This issue with this bleeding. This is a lot of trouble that you do and have, and this utility first approach tries to solve this. I can maybe show what it's meant. Normally, you have this coupling of styles. So I make it bigger maybe. So we have this greeting, and then you have greeting there, and it's still coupled. The style is coupled. And then you have maybe CSS. This is a bad approach, but then you reflect the structure of the component tree inside the CSS. So you don't have reusable CSS at all. You have to, when you have another component, throw it away or try to get it working or whatever. You have clean HTML, but your CSS gets weird. Then you have
Maybe
this.
You can explain, just as a recap, what the greater sign operator does in this example.
This one?
Yes.
This means that the image tag that you style in this case has to be a direct child, as far as I recall, from the author bio class parent. Is it correct? I think so.
Yes, the direct child operator. So it's a way of avoiding that your CSS rules apply to nested elements, right? So it must be one level down and no further.
Exactly. And then you have here global styles. For example, the body is a global style, but it applies to every child element. So, and then you have this approach of the BEM methodology. So we have now the HTML structure, and you have everything that points to the outer styling, and then you have your CSS, which still are a lot of copies of some same paddings or margins and so on everywhere over the place. So we have standard margins or paddings all over the place, which you could use with custom bars or custom properties in CSS. But still, you have to be sure that you have the same stylings and yeah. So, but still, there's no separation in this case. And this is where CSS or the utility-based approach comes in. Also, big companies like Facebook, I think it was also, and Microsoft also do now utility first CSS because of these issues. Every time you have a new feature, your CSS will bloat and get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then there's a point where you can't maintain it because it's so huge and everything depends on each other, and you need design systems to have like common specifications. And here comes Tailwind, where it's a configuration-based approach. So you have already presets, for example, sizing. You have a lot of things which are based on, I think it's an exponential, or not exponential, but a scale that that has nice sizings that looks good. So you have it for the width, for example. You have color palettes which are beautiful, starting with shades of 50 up to 900. You have ready-made typography which you can use, sans serif, monotypes, which are used for numbers, for example, to not swivel between the width of the letters. You have shadows like in material design, but everything can be used like you want to. So you are not bound to a specific design. So you see here, you have this HTML markup, which, by the way, will not look this big when you use components, because you want to extract this stuff in separate places. So you have the button component, which you could also use a thing like black or whatever as a property and then style it inside.
Yeah, so
with
just
the
to
Tailwind
recap
thing.
maybe. So what utility first means, or utility classes, is that you have, as far as I understand it, and maybe you can correct me, you have CSS classes which are connected to CSS rules, and only to a very few number of CSS rules, maybe just one or two, and then you can reuse them across the entire application, and you can combine them. That's the whole idea.
Exactly. It's basically like you would write your CSS class, right? So we would like have a wrapper here or an image wrapper or whatever, and you would do flex none on it and a width of 84, which is not pixel, but it's, I think, on the rem spacing, and a relative display is a position relative.
Can we look this up maybe for a second? I think that they have API documentation where you can see
Sure.
which utility class belongs to which CSS rule. I think this would help to understand the whole idea.
Yeah.
I think it's on TailwindCSS.com. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's documentation. There I wanted to go. So, for example, for relative, so we use this, and now it's not written there what is used, but it's obvious. But you don't see on the side which exactly they use. But I think that is, yeah.
If you just look for width, for example, I think they have like two columns where you see on one column the utility class.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the relative sizes. There's also a tool which I wanted to show. It's which is it? It's the Tailwind config viewer. You can you can use this as a style guide basically for your application, and everything that you set up, because you can change these configurations, you can see here. So you can look it up. The margins, the paddings, negative margins, and the sizes of the text, and you see which sizes are used, the widths, spacings, line heights. For example, breakpoints you have already there, so we see also which is what they are defined, the shadows, what values they are using, and so on. So you can see the whole configuration in one place. This is a package that you can install, and yeah, also animations, by the way, which you can use.
So this utility first idea solves specificity wars or specificity issues by enumerate, like one CSS class usually refers to one CSS rule. And because you enumerate all those utility classes, the complexity is so low that it can never happen that you have specificity issues, right? Because you enumerate all your rules in your template, and yeah, and that's it, right? So like what? Yeah, can you compare this to a normal setting or a normal scenario where you would have problems because you were having many CSS rules per class and they apply to sub elements or whatnot? Like, I think I get the idea, but maybe you can show how this is guaranteeing that you don't run into those specificity issues.
Yeah, I can tell how it works, because the stylings, there is no when you just use Tailwind CSS, you have no global styling in this case. There are no stylings of H1, H2 tags or paragraphs. They are not there. So you have always to style it your own way, and you don't have to override anything because of this. There is no style which applies to child elements, where you have like things that bleed to the children, or you styling a form and all forms in a specific way, and then you want to have a by the tag form, for example, and then you want to style another form differently, and then you have to override it when you use standard CSS without classes. And also this combination, because you can write even when you use BAM or BAM, you have to make sure yourself to not use properties too much. Also styling like parents or something like this. There are articles regarding this also on the Tailwind site, which you can look up. I have some links at the end of the presentation, which you also will get. So yeah, there are, and here, because it's broken down into the smallest pieces, you don't have to overwrite anything, because it's only applied to this element which you are using this styles at. There are different things like spacer between elements in an element and such, but yeah, it's easier because it's Lego. It's Lego blocks that you put together instead of like this bags over bags. Sometimes I imagine with CSS you have a lot of power of CSS, but you can also do a lot of harm because you have all these possibilities. And here it's stripped down to these blocks, and yeah, you have less ability because it's designed this way to work. So you still have power, but you are limited to not do a lot of wrong things.
Yeah, would you agree, or do I understand it correctly, that with other CSS approaches you have like defaults and you diverge from those defaults by overriding things?
Yes.
And Tailwind, you always start from zero and you enumerate everything.
Not exactly from zero. You have a standard style. You have this shadows. You have different rounding corners that you can use and stuff, and the color palettes. But still, you can very easily override them through configuration. So you don't have to use CSS or Sass or vars for it. You can, but you don't have to. And in the end, you get a package that is very small, which I will show you in a bit. So here, for example, you have the same HTML tag markup, but you change the classes, and you can style it how you want, right? Just by changing this utility classes. You don't have to write any CSS for this. You just use these building blocks.
Nice. I think I get it. And I can also see that in the end, you will end up with having no custom CSS rules and just use your utility classes in your template. Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
And another thing is, because you're using this class approach, you can use post CSS with purge CSS, which you specify which files you have. For example, you have your view files, you have your styles, CSS styles. Maybe you have some CSS files with the styles used, and as long as they are in markup somewhere, they will get purge CSS will go through it, see what is used, and throw away everything else. So we end up from 20,000 unused classes, because Tailwind is built this way that you have these modifiers like breakpoints or hovers or whatever, and then you have all colors that you can apply on this state. So Tailwind has to build this huge amount of classes that you can even extend, or sometimes also throw things in the configuration away. But you have these combinations, and purge CSS throws away everything that you don't use, and you end up with really, really small CSS files that normally get bloated because you have a lot of styles and stuff, and you don't use all of them, and you override a lot of them, and so, but still the code is there. And here it gets shaped away.
Is this also only possible because you use utility class, or because you have them in your template, right? Purge CSS is only able to do that because it knows what you're using in your template and is able to tell what is being used and what not. And then it can throw away all those CSS rules that you don't need.
So you see here with gzip, which most servers do, it's a package of 300 kilobytes, just the CSS. But when you go through and do the purge, it ends up in several kilobytes in one digit form. And this is used with regexes that go through the code and see the classes and finding everything that they need. So when you write, for example, dynamic classes, you just have to be sure that the classes are not combined as a string, so no variables in the string. You have to have always the string as a whole. And you can still switch, you can still use conditions to apply styles, but you have to always be aware to use the whole string. And here you see this purge locations where the thing try to find the styles, right?
I think this is quite important. I don't think all our students did immediately understand or did get what you were talking about. So we're talking about Vue.js, and we're talking about dynamically removing or applying CSS classes.
Yeah.
And this is possible. It's called conditional classes or something, and you can check it out on Vue.js. And then now the problem is, how can I tell purge CSS which classes I might use at runtime, right? So you change the classes in the template at runtime.
Yeah.
So not at build time, but at runtime. And obviously, this may lead to problems with purge CSS, because purge CSS doesn't know or cannot see or identify those classes being used. For example, in the example above, so you have a class which is either text-error text-600 or text-red-600 or text-green-600.
Exactly.
And if you do string interpolation like this is called string interpolation with this double curly braces. It won't work. It won't work if you do it like this. And below, you have the whole CSS class as a string inside the string interpolation, and then Purge CSS is able to pick it up.
Exactly.
Right? Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Can students, could you please just write in the chat so we know that you are live, because people don't write in the chat so that much right now, that you understand what we're talking about? Alive. Very good. Nice.
Cool. Yeah, so this is something that you have to keep in mind when you're using these dynamic classes. I think I did it. So, and the whole thing is also like responsive. Responsibility can be hard. You have to use media tags and be aware that you catch every class to be responsive in the end. And with Tailwind, it's pretty easy. So we have here, you have this grayed out stuff is not applied because they have like these prefixes for the breakpoints we saw already. So we have small breakpoints, medium breakpoints, and bigger ones. And when I grab this one, it will show highlight down there which classes apply then. So you see now the small breakpoints get triggered. So we have like 2 grid columns now instead of 1. And also horizontal or padding on the x-axis is like now 8. On the y-axis is 12, and you have a gap between these columns of 8 in the x-axis. So you come from this and change to that. And also hide some number here. I don't know which number this is. This number gets hidden. So because it's small, hidden. And on the bigger screen, it gets shown again because it's now back to inline. And now we have a bit more spacing then because we have the room to breathe more. This is how this conditional or prefixed stuff works with Tailwind. Yeah. This is the Tailwind CSS I see in the chat. This is the Tailwind CSS site. They just updated it, and I thought they have so nice examples. I will show you the website because they do a very good job to explain this. Okay, my dog gets crazy. And not just breakpoints that you can use there directly. You can use also hover, for example. So here you have like when I hover this whole element, the A tag that you see on the right, then it changes the color. And items inside, like the DD element there, have a group hover. So they react when, or get triggered when the parent element with the hover gets hovered. So you can style this, right, this way. And you don't have to leave the DOM for this, the HTML element, to style this. And it is nice because you can like copy whole elements with styling, and still it will work. You don't have to be sure that your CSS is lying somewhere and these class names are matching. You have it directly in this spot. So you have like focus for text inputs like here, active for buttons, disabled and stuff like this. Yeah. And regarding, we will do, I think you did Vue.js 2 already, right?
Yes, so we did Vue.js 2. A couple of groups opted in to use Vue.js 3, and some of them ran into issues because we were using third-party libraries like, what's it called? Storybook, which is not Vue.js 3 compatible yet. And they also discovered, those teams discovered there's a nice backwards compatible API for Vue.js 2. So you can write Vue.js 3 API, still use Vue.js 2, and have backwards compatibility with third-party libraries like Storybook. And I don't know if Vue test utils is there yet. I don't know. Maybe people can write in the chat, those groups who have more experience, which is Vue test utils Vue 3 compatible yet?
I think so. I think there is a branch for it.
Yeah. For me, it was super alpha, so I turned back to Vue 2. So yeah.
Yeah. It's still pretty early. But I think there's a really nice framework, by the way, I can maybe share. It's also from the inventor of Vue.js. I don't know if you know this. It's Byte.js. It's amazing because it does not have this build process that takes so much time in development, because it uses native JS modules. And I think testing is also here inside. I don't know exactly, but you can check it out. It's byte.js.dev. And it's pretty fast and hot reload and stuff on development. It's pretty cool. That's just a tip. You have the components, which, because of this ugly syntax of Tailwind, which you need to get used to be honest, but it has so much benefits that it's worth it. And for example, here is this whole component. It's split up into different components, and here you see there are not many Tailwind classes here. Then you have the Navbar, which also has some classes with slots where nav items come in, which has some conditional classes, which you can see here. So for example, this classes get appended when the item is active. So it becomes background amber and text amber with a darker shade. And also these classes are always there. So you can write it in Vue.js like this. And so on.
Just to get this right. So what we see here is a response to this criticism of Tailwind, that people say Tailwind is ugly because they are not used to enumerate so many CSS classes in the template and not writing CSS classes anymore, right? So what we see here is number of components. So in the tabs, we have recipes.vue, nav.vue, navitem.vue. I also like that the tutorial on Tailwind CSS is actually using Vue.js, which I like. Oh no, you clicked on Vue. There's another.
Yes, there's also for React. You can see how you can use this with React 2 or with Blade when you use, for example, Laravel PHP. So
I see. I was in the first moment, I was kind of proud that they're using Vue.js as the first. But okay, I was happy too early. Anyway, but you see 5 components there, and this is how you would write smaller components with less CSS classes and still like readable code. The moral message here is, if you write many components and you structure your code wisely, you will not end up with CSS classes, like 50 CSS classes on one line, right? So that's what's being explained here, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's still readable, and it's dynamic because you can apply them if you need to. So we don't have to have like still a lot of CSS to have like this active class and this hover class. You do it everything here. It's pretty nice. And to that one that want to use BEM still, but don't like to write in CSS maybe, there is a way to use the apply command if you have post CSS running in your build process. So we have the possibility to write still BEM classes and apply this styles. So you still have this whole thing of UI template, not the UI template, what I wanted to say, style guide, right? all these colors, all these paddings, and so on, and can apply them on these classes. So you can
Can you
write
explain what is
clean.
apply? What does add apply do? What does it do?
Apply is doing basically just inlining these styles from Tailwind. So you get this class with a background color with the hex code of this variable and the text color of white.
So it's applying. It's basically as if I would replace the text BG rows 500 with the respective CSS rule there.
Exactly, but you don't have to copy it all around. And it's
And
still
I can do this with any CSS class I want.
with any Tailwind CSS class, yeah, that you can specify there. This is, you can also write like there's a helper template or no theme, and you can use like brackets, and you can then also enter this variable that I can show you later.
So
But
this would also be a way of, let's say I have the same combination of Tailwind classes all over the place for whatever reason. I could make a shortcut like this, right?
exactly. Yes.
So I just say I want to have one CSS class, which is a substitution of 20 CSS classes.
Yeah.
Nice.
But
And
the issue with this is that you still end up with a lot of classes with copies of these small classes. So your CSS, when you use it extensively, will still grow, and you you have not this benefit of having these small Legos, because you build something out of Legos and sell it as a whole, and then you have another thing that you have to build from the same Lego blocks, but you have these copies.
yeah. So what you're talking about is about the bundle size, right? So
Yes.
when you have a CSS document with CSS rules, the file where the CSS rules are written, like the code that the browser will download, this will grow if you use this apply extensively. That's what you're saying, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's not the recommended way, but you can do it. So, and it's still Purge CSS will still be able to get, as far as I know, to get to know which classes you use and to throw away everything else.
Where does this apply come from? Is it Tailwind or is it Post CSS or Purge CSS? Where does it come from?
I'm not exactly sure, but it's something from Post CSS. Maybe it's a plugin from Tailwind, so you can write plugins for Post CSS. So I think it's a combination.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it would be interesting to know if you can use this actually outside of Tailwind too. But yeah, I never saw that. But I was like looking for this. I do remember that I was looking for exactly this. Like I want to basically apply all the CSS classes which I know from there, or all the CSS rules which I know from this CSS class. Can you just please enter it like there, like a shorthand? I was using looking for this. And
I started this way and used this apply method because I thought, I want to write my CSS styles this way because it's cleaner. But I ended up having more issues with it than it solved in the end. It was, in the first place, it was more common to what I know, but in the end, it was still these issues of CSS that you have, and but you can use it. It's an option. So
Nice.
but when you do it, use it wisely.
Okay.
And of course, you have like something because of these prefixes that you have. You can use something like dark mode, for example. You have this prefix of dark, which gets triggered by, for example, a media tag. So your browser knows you have in CSS this media tag of dark mode, I think, or I don't know how it's called, but it gets triggered here. So when your system, macOS or Windows or Linux, is set to dark mode, and your browser communicates it to the website, it can be switched. Or you use the switch with another CSS class that you apply. I think on the I don't know how it's exactly done right now because it's a new feature. But you have this option. So you just write here with the prefix the new styles that you want to apply on the element when you use dark mode.
Nice. In the last lecture, I introduced custom CSS properties, which can be used for many things, but the favorite use case is exactly this, like having different color themes and being able to switch them at runtime. That was like the popular use case for custom properties. Does Tailwind use custom properties, or these? Some people call it CSS variables. Maybe you can show a little bit of code, so we have everyone on board. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
see
you
CSS
see,
variables there.
you see already some variables here.
Can you increase the font size a little bit?
Here, I don't know.
I think it should be possible. Yes. Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, so you have some variables here already, yeah. But I can maybe I have HTML part. I don't know exactly how much, but you can use them inside of the configuration. So I will show you the configuration. Maybe it's the next one, extended. Yeah, this is the configuration part. So all colors, for example, that you saw, when you can BG dash back primary or gray and the shade, you can extend and replace them. So you have this configuration thing, which is a JavaScript part, just on the when you use the build. You can also use the ready built CSS file or from the CDN or everywhere else. And but you don't have to build it, so you can use something ready. But when you want to customize it, you use this settings or this configuration file, tailwind.config.js, and you can also apply their custom CSS properties. So you could use here properties that you can override at runtime.
Nice. So I have two options as far as I understand it. I can see primary is like an abstract name in contrast to, for example, gray, which is a color.
Yeah, this is a custom one already. Yeah.
Yeah. So this name is then a name which I can use in my template as a utility class.
Yeah,
and
you
then
see
I can probably just switch the color theme in a central location, and the primary color will get a new value. Right?
Exactly.
And this is how I can switch color themes at runtime. So as far as I understand it, you can use both. You can either use hard-coded the color names, which are defined in Tailwind, like the color values, but you can also use abstract names for colors, and then define them based on the theme that I'm using, like dark or white, or I don't know, maybe even color themes. I can go crazy if I want to. And use 20,000 different themes, and if I wanted to. But yeah, so this is how I understand it. So you can use both. You can use custom properties or explicit color values.
Yeah. Exactly. And you can see here the fonts and stuff. And when you change the configuration, the output also changes. So here the primary got changed and stuff, right? So, and you have still the possibility to do everything through configuration and don't have to go through all the code and change this stuff. So when you have the components where you are happy with spacing and this not too specific variables, then you can switch it. So you can also the sizes, so the fonts, everything you can change if you like to, and extend. So here, for example, the font is font body. So this is this font family body, right? So you can override this how you want. So this is the notation, like when the system has this inter font, it uses this one. It's basically the font CSS rule.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, can you please click on what the heck is brutalist? What is that?
This is this? Yes. I don't know why. Maybe someone don't like this monofonts.
Okay. I don't think monofonts are brutal.
But they're very financial, you know, it's strict. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, and also you have things like CSS grids that you already know. So you can define them here to these classes. And yeah, you have also transforms and gradients, which are pre-made. But you can use like a start color and direction and an end color. So from color to color, you can use, for example, this primary that you defined, and you use like bottom right, from bottom to.
That would be interesting. Do you know anything about transitions in Tailwind versus Vue.js? I mean, I understood, because I was like preparing this for last lecture, how transitions work with Vue.js, where you have this renderless component transition, and then you give it a name, and Vue.js is taking care of applying CSS classes, but it's your job of giving meaning to those CSS classes, like I did. Like I said, okay, on the first like frame of the enter transition, I want the element to be no, I don't know, 300 pixels to the right, and then it should slide in, for example. How does that relate to Tailwind's transitions? How do I like can put them together?
Yeah, you can, for example, you can. I don't exactly know how to use them out of my hand, but there are examples. I couldn't find them right now, but there are examples how you use this. I think even, yeah, you can combine the both, so it will work fine. This transitions, I think transform. This is transform just. I don't have animations here, I think.
Yeah, in Vue.js you would see a renderless component, right? So you have this component transition, or what is it called? Let me see in my code real quick. Page sidebar. It's called transition. So Vue.js comes with a renderless component called transition.
Yeah.
And then you have to give it a name.
Yeah, you have this thing in this rendered components in Vue that you can specify the classes. You can specify either the classes in style because of the name, or you can define these properties from to leave as a string too. So you could use this, or you can use this with Tailwind. I can.
Actually, I just got the idea that you can also could use apply, right? I mean, you have.
You can.
Okay. So let's
When you
see
have, it's better to use apply in this case. When you have like a reusable animation that you want to use on different components, then you would use create a class with the specific name and put there this values that you want to, and so in this fashion, right?
Yeah, where you see transition opacity and opacity 0, that's where you would say apply and then enter whatever you want, right?
Yeah. But you can also use this this properties. I think it is. What class is it? No, is it?
So at configuration time, I tell it I can add my names, and the names they match with the names that Vue.js uses.
No, it's here. You have this transition. You can use a name. And you have these properties like enter active class, leave active class. And when this whole thing is like have this transition class around it, I think it is in Tailwind, I'm not exactly sure, then it will animate it. And just switching the classes like this.
Yeah, great, nice. And these would be a number of utility classes then. Perfect.
Yes.
Well,
Yes, and you could theoretically, you could make this transition another class which has this stuff applied. So you don't have to. You can reuse it, but you don't have to write your own CSS and then use apply. You can do both. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. And Tailwind, they basically hired the guy that made the extension for VS Code and I think Atom and stuff. That you have auto completion for all variables in Tailwind, even the one that you're specifying, because this thing reads the configurations. you have like problems that you get shown. For example, here flex and block on one element does not work because they are both display properties on display properties in CSS, and they would override each other. So you get this information here. There's also an extension where it's saying you have a lot of items that use the same combination of classes, and you could refactor them. There are a lot of cool tools that you can use with Tailwind because the community is really huge.
That's nice. I didn't know that there's ID support for that. Was something that I had in my mind. What happens? Like I wanted to experiment a little bit with it. What happens if I combine contradictory utility classes? Which will win? Like, is there a rule for it?
I think the first one gets applied and the second gets ignored. I think it was this way.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but here you get the info. I don't know if it's for the other editors, but VS Code is the most common.
Yeah, Perch CSS should be able to tell at compile time if you have contradictory CSS classes, right?
Couldn't
be a feature of Perch CSS then?
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, and there's also this thing from them, which why they can still develop it further, and they they are financed by this component library because Tailwind itself has not much components that are ready made. You have to design them yourself, but you have this library that they just growing, and this is paid. Which you can like at least get inspiration from it. There are different ones I can show you in a minute, but here you have a lot of components that you can at least inspire yourself. They make a lot of cool things that no one is thinking about when they are having a life. For example, alerts. No, not alerts, modals I wanted to show. Modals, where are you? Here. Modals. This is a model that's with animation and backdrop and such. And the thing is, on mobile, because it's responsive, it's down at the device. If it would be a bit higher, you would see it better. But it's down and not in the middle of the screen, because the user can better reach the buttons with the thumb. So something like this, they also think about.
So what we are currently seeing is a premium feature, right?
This is they have like free components there too. So this one is free. There are others that are like, you see, just PNG previews. You don't get. But there is a site which is called. I have it open already. No.
The company who's implementing or is developing Tailwind CSS also has like a business model on providing high quality components in one particular. That would be then framework. That wouldn't be framework agnostic, right? So this component is implemented in either React or Vue.js. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. You see, it says here requires JS, but they don't give you this JS. So I think, I don't know if they have. You have the information what to do to get it working. For example, this transitions, which you then would have to
Okay, so this is the HTML template, and I have to make the mental challenge or the mental combination. I think now in Vue.js, and I know how transitions work in Vue.js, and I can see these comments. And then this is now my job. I have to provide the classes at runtime and change them at runtime on certain events, and then this all works. And this is just HTML and CSS.
Exactly. So you can get this component here. I can show it to you. There's a nice tool which is called Tailwind Play. So when you go to play.tailwindcss.com, you have this IDE where you can play with this stuff. So when I try and paste in this thing, I have this component running. It's not animated and no logic, but I have it already here, and I could design this. I can, for example, do instead of, yeah, this is a long class guy. Okay, and do instead of red, I would do, where's the red? The really long one. Bad example. Is it red or is it what? Ah, is it wrong button, right? Yeah, I did it on the wrong button. So we have, instead of red, you could go do green, right? Here's a red. So then you have a green button, and you can style it this way and combine the stuff. So if I would do and go to this library of Tailwind UI, I can browse for free sample components. And I would do that, for example, get the code from this component here, paste it in, and have this site here already. Then
So
I go.
CSS is completely framework agnostic, right? So
Yes.
it's only HTML and CSS, and therefore I can use it for any framework I want. I can use it for React. I can use it wherever I want. It would even work without JS completely, except for those exception cases where it's needed to have JavaScript, and it's completely framework agnostic.
Exactly. And you have, for example, here on tailwindcomponents.com, you can have like free community components, and I could get this one and put it, I think it's here.
Yeah, that's another nice question. Given I don't want to implement everything myself, and I'm in Vue.js land, where can I find high quality components that were built with Tailwind CSS? Because probably I don't want to use any other component library, right? Or I could do, but it's probably nicer and more maintainable to use components or third-party components which are also built with Tailwind, right? Correct?
Yeah, there are some stuff that you can use. I would just search for it. So there are. I had once a compiled list, but I don't know exactly how it was. Went CSS compile. There are, I think, lists of them that people compiled. Tailwind kit. So you have like forms. To have some stuff, so you can copy it and put it in here, and you have this card.
Nice, cool.
And you can completely customize it. This is the prettiness of this thing, right? So you can go here and put another card beside it, and then I would. I think I should. Where is it? So wrap it in a flex. So I have it beside each other, and then I can save and format it, right? It's a flex, and then I can have spacing, for example, space x on the x-axis, like with 3 or with, and you have direct response on how this thing will look. So it's hot reloading basically.
Nice.
It's pretty nice.
That's
so you
cool.
you can build your UI in this way. For example, you have another free thing here on Tailwind. So we copy this part here, and you want to have it where the dashboard line here is. So we have this header, and you just replace it if you do it right. Is it this one? Yeah, it is. I hope I copied the correct one. I don't think so. I have still the other one.
In your clipboard.
Yeah. And the dog showed me that I'm wrong.
I see.
Again.
By the way, we have 10 minutes left. What do you think? Shall I, just for a comparison, show the students Vuetify for like as a comparison, how that would differ from using Tailwind CSS? Or is there anything you want to add?
What I want to add, not really. There are like a lot of plugins that you can use with Tailwind. So this configuration part is really important. There are some colors that you can use optionally, which are disabled by default. There is also a nice library, Hericons, from the people that make this. So you can just copy SVGs, for example, here, and then you put it in here, and you have it already. They're pretty nice stuff that you can combine, and then you have like class with 7, and you have this icon here, right? That's easy.
Nice.
So it's these building blocks that are so awesome. And here you have even dark mode included already. Yeah, beside this, I think it's all.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. I will quickly grab the presenter.
Sure.
So my idea is to really quick give you an idea, because it's in the homework and it's mentioned there, just to give the people, I'm in Firefox, not too many browsers. You can see my screen? No, you can't. I should share my screen, I guess. Share. Maybe share my webcam. I was not sharing it in order to save bandwidth. So now you should see my screen. And since it was mentioned in the homework, I want to quickly give you an introduction to, really just for a couple of minutes, into Vuetify, which is like an alternative approach. So now you learn everything which is nice about Tailwind CSS. And I'm also like a big fan of Tailwind. And I added this this diagram to give you like a high-level overview how those 3 approaches relate. You can see my screen now. Hello again.
Yes.
You are now muted.
Okay, so what we talked about is Tailwind, which is like a nice, I would say, balance between convenience and flexibility. So it gives you a lot, but it doesn't really take away flexibility from you, because you still can do anything you want, I would say. There's nothing that comes to my mind which is like which Tailwind kind of blocks or which restricts you or limits you in any way. And another way, and Tailwind is also framework agnostic, so you can use it for Vue.js, but you can use it for other things. And Vuetify is a component library. It's different from Tailwind because it's a component library for Vue.js only. And it's opinionated. So Tailwind is not opinionated, and Vuetify is, because Vuetify is using material design. Probably you have heard about it. It's this design specification by Google in order to let all products of Google somehow look the same. Plus, every other website which is also using material design suddenly looks like Google. Right? So this is like a specification, how things have to look like. There's no implementation, only specification. And there are a couple of implementations out there which are trying to implement material design. Does that make sense? So far? Can please say somebody say something? Hello?
You are now unmuted.
Okay. So material design made by Google, let everything look like Google. And yeah, if you like it, you can use it, and you can go to any implementation you like. One of those implementations is Vuetify. And it's a component library specifically made for Vue.js, right? So you cannot use it in React, for example. And component library means that you can that you already get JavaScript and CSS together, and it's opinionated, and it's really easy to get started because it comes with so many components. Hello, my browser is too slow. I'm sorry. So it comes with pre-made components for you, and you can click on them and then check them out. For example, you have you have sidebars. I wanted to show you how you can really easily implement the menu. Where is it? Menu, maybe navigation drawers. There we go. So this is the homework exercise. If you basically just copy paste from Vuetify, if you want to go this way, fine. But then you have like the sidebar here, and you can click on the documentation in order to check out what is it. So this vcard is a component that comes from Vuetify. All right. And this is different from Tailwind, for example. In Tailwind, you would add CSS classes, but you don't have any components of Tailwind because Tailwind is framework agnostic, right? So this is like the biggest difference here. And those components which you can use are all enumerated here. What I don't like about Vuetify, though, is that it's so difficult to customize. I suggest to you to use Vuetify in those scenarios where you, A, do not have a design guideline. For example, you do not work for a company which comes with its own design specifications, right? Its own colors, its own fonts, and yeah, design specifications. If you don't have that, then you can apply material design. I would not suggest to use Vuetify in the scenario where you have the design specification and you try to customize Vuetify so that it does what you want it to do. I think that's an anti-pattern. Use it when you're happy with material design, or when if you're happy with how this looks like. Because if you try to customize it, I have, yeah, this is plain CSS web app, and this is the Vuetify web app. So I had tried to like refactor some of the components with of the plain CSS example from last lecture. So for example, I think the only thing that changed was the buttons. So we have page header, and there you see vButton. Where does it come from? I installed the Nuxt integration for Vuetify, which is called @nuxt.js/Vuetify. Nuxt.js Vuetify. So you go on the internet and you click on GitHub. Why don't I see the GitHub page? GitHub Nuxt.js Vuetify. My computer is really slow. Am I breaking up for you? Can you hear me clearly? Okay.
You are now muted.
So my computer is really, really slow for some reason. So this is like the Nuxt.js module that you want to install and add to your Nuxt configuration. By the way, there's a Tailwind configuration for Nuxt too. So maybe that's something that Greg was missing. There's the same like integration for it as well. And I want to show you how you could customize if you really wanted to, which I kind of discourage you to do so because it's like a pain. So you have configuration options in your Nuxt config, and they can say custom variables. And there you have an SCSS file. Why SCSS? Because that's how Vuetify is built. Vuetify uses SCSS in order to basically define everything. This is now the source code of Vuetify. And in Vuetify, you see, for example, that it's declaring a bunch of variables. For example, font family, which is like Roboto. The default font size is 16 pixel. And then it's having a lot of SCSS variables for basically everything else. And you can see it's always using this -default, right? What does a -default do? It's declaring or it's assigning a variable if it doesn't exist yet. And that's the trick. If you want to override, for example, the size of header level 1, you would declare a variable before it's being declared by Vuetify. Or like a better example would be probably, yeah, just use here, font size root. Before it's being declared by Vuetify, you declare this variable yourself and make, I don't know, 18 pixels. Why is it still building? Wow, my computer is so slow. I'm sorry for the overtime, but that's...
Are you plugged in?
plugged into what?
Power outlet.
Yes. I have too many tabs, maybe. I don't know. Maybe close this.
You're using Chrome. That's the issue.
Close this. I'm still happy that you can hear me, though. Okay, now we are there. So localhost 3000. As you can see, I replaced a button with a Vuetify button. Come on! I'm impatient. It's already the end of the lecture. Okay, so here you see the button already. So it has this ripple effect, which comes from material design, right? So I didn't do anything. There's a font already applied. There's this shadow applied. There's this ripple effect applied. When I click on it, you can see this, hopefully. And I don't know why, but why it is looking like this, I have absolutely no idea. Okay, now it's looking different. Interesting. Now they have the menu button. So the only thing I basically changed is replacing this with a V button component. There you can see it's already having its own styles. If I click on it and I click on styles, you see all those CSS rules, V button. This is all coming from Vuetify. Also, it's adding a lot to the bundle. So before, I had a bundle of 400 kilobytes, I think. This is the development environment. Don't think, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm using yarn run dev, and now it's 14 megabyte, which is huge. But when I bundle it for production, it's like 1 megabyte something. So it's almost doubled from 400 kilobytes to 1 megabyte, and I think 100 megabyte. So that's also something to consider. If you use Vuetify, you get a bigger bundle just because you use the library. With Tailwind CSS, you have purged CSS. First of all, there's no JavaScript, which is coming from Tailwind. Second, your CSS is also really, really small. And right, that's one thing to consider. And if you want to customize Vuetify, what you have to do is you say, for example, default assets. You don't want to. I was, for example, changing the font. Nuxt.js module already comes with a font and material design icons. So I disable that because I want to use my own fonts. My own fonts are here. I'm using a package called font source and a font. And then you say tree shake true. This is then using your own CSS, SCSS variables as an input in the compilation time. Also for development, you have to put this in, to see the effect. And then you declare your own custom variables in a file. And in this file, I have, for example, the font size increased, right? If I do this, then I declare this variable before Vuetify can pick it up. And this is how I can, at compile time, change the respective values. If I don't know, make this to 12 pixels, then you see that the build process is started again. In 20 years from now, we will probably see a change in the font size. So I just want to quickly show you this in order to give you an idea how you could customize Vuetify if you really wanted to, and how this differs from Tailwind. And I hope this kind of explains what I tried to say with this picture, that it's really difficult to customize Vuetify because it has its own styles, it's using material design, it's opinionated and everything, which is great if you don't have a design specification yourself. If you don't have one, maybe you're happy with material design. A lot of customers, companies, I don't know, already have their own designs. So if you work for them and you find yourself in a situation where you have a design specification given, maybe use one of those two approaches, I would say. Either write everything yourself, start with plain CSS. It's great. A lot of front-end developers just use plain CSS. or Tailwind, which doesn't really restrict you in your flexibility, and you can still implement the design specification which are given to you, right? That's it. Smaller font size. There you go. 14 pixels, as you can see here. I don't know. Somewhere here, I overwrote the CSS rule for font size there. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I hope you understand or have an idea how you can customize Vuetify now if you want to use it. For the homework, it will certainly be the quickest way of implementing this. But yeah, plain CSS is also a nice approach. Or if you want to try out what Greg introduced you in this lecture, try Tailwind CSS. That's it from my side. That's all I have. Now it would be time for questions regarding Tailwind CSS or Vuetify. Questions in the chat, or just unmute yourself and speak. Is there anything that I missed, Yuri, maybe? Do you miss something?
You are now unmuted.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, but it isn't, because inline CSS, you define everything all over again. And with Tailwind, you have this class specified, so you don't repeat this stuff. It's ugly in the first place. I totally agree. I was also, the first time when I saw Tailwind, it was, this goes against my I don't know, my eyes, right? But after really starting to using it, it makes really fun to work with it. And this is the important part for me, at least. The most people that rant about Tailwind don't do it, first, don't do it long enough, or use this apply syntax, which they then struggle with. So this is what I observed, at least. So give it a try. It's not for everyone, totally, but yeah, it takes time.
But I have to agree with Yuri in that respect, that it feels a little bit like inline styles, because you write, like, you don't write CSS yourself. All right, you write CSS classes, fine, but in some way you write CSS because you know which CSS class stands for which CSS rule. So you apply those rules in the template, and that's probably what you're talking about, Yuri. It feels like a writing inline styles, right?
Yeah.
There's one question in the chat. Greg, how is Tailwind CSS different from Bootstrap?
Yeah, Bootstrap has the advantage of having these components already there, but then you have still this issue that you can't customize them at free will. I didn't looked a long time in Bootstrap, but Bootstrap is very bloated. It has a lot of stuff that they're offering you. And sure, you can use Bootstrap, but I think the community for Tailwind already is bigger than Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is this hybrid approach of giving you everything and still having this utility classes, but I don't know how much utility classes they have. I don't know exactly.
I wouldn't say they use utility classes at all, to be honest. I would probably answer the question that Bootstrap doesn't know utility classes, I guess.
I saw some, at least. I don't know. I didn't dig further, but
okay, fair enough. I thought like classes like container, which is in Bootstrap, does a lot of things and is applying many rules to at once, and also to sub elements. And but it is comparable with Tailwind CSS, that it's also mostly CSS and also framework agnostic. There are integrations for other frameworks like I don't know, Vue.js or whatnot, but it's most of it is I think CSS. I think it also has a little bit of JavaScript coming with it in order to get the animations right. But yeah, but they are both the CSS frameworks, Tailwind CSS and Bootstrap. But Bootstrap, I would say, doesn't use utility class, I guess. And it's not customizable. True. You have to override. You have to override the CSS rules afterwards, right? That's also what you do with Vuetify. When I was using Vuetify, I ran into a situation where I couldn't change a particular CSS class because it was hard-coded into the library. So you have, for example, a drop-down, and you click on select boxes, and then you have tags in the drop-down menu, and the drop-down tags have colors. And those colors were just hard-coded. You couldn't change them. And what you had to do is you have to add your own CSS again and fight those CSS rules coming from Vuetify with bang important, for example.
Yeah, there's another question regarding responsiveness. There are these prefixes.
Oh yeah, and by the way, someone is also answering the previous question. There's no purging in Bootstrap.
Yeah. Learn something again. So wait, where is it? Tailwind CSS. I think it's this one. I can share in a minute. So regarding responsiveness, on the side of Tailwind, you can see these prefixes here. So these are your basically like media queries. You have this SM for the small breakpoint. Everything without prefix is applied as long as it's not overwritten by a prefixed breakpoint class. So here you see the SM breakpoints get triggered and applies or overrides the stuff before, and the bigger ones. So there are different breakpoints that you can look up. So this is the responsiveness of Tailwind. And there's, by the way, a really awesome tool that is in development for Tailwind. Just from this methodology, how Bootstrap works. You have, not Bootstrap, sorry, Tailwind. You have a tool. This is a browser plugin which a company made. You can basically go on an element, click on it, and you have all styles in Tailwind syntax and can just paste it. Or this element, you can paste this element that you picked from a site with totally different CSS. And this thing tries to estimate the colors that match and stuff. It's totally insane. And they have also a color picker for Tailwind colors, which match. Wow. So this is the advantage of using these utility classes.
Yeah,
I find it totally fascinating.
Yeah, great. Well, we answered responsiveness. We answered Bootstrap. I see no more questions in the chat. Is that right? No one is typing. Now or never. If there are no questions anymore, I would say, Greg, thank you so much for coming. I totally loved it. I love that you introduced Tailwind CSS to us, and you see the virtual clapping in the chat. So we're not in a real lecture, and people are muted, but they write clapping and knocking in the chat. That's for you. So
yeah, thanks for inviting me. It was fun to show it to you.
Of course. Thank you so much. And yeah, anything, last words? I don't know what you can tell the students or vice versa.
Use the tools that get your job done. This is the important part. So when you use something and are good at it, it's Tailwind or Vuetify or whatever, use it because you have to get a job done. And so no wars between methodologies, but just use what works. That's my message from this side.
Excellent. So 1 person, 2 people are writing that that's it. Excellent final words. Let's call it a day. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the
You are now
recording,
muted.
and my computer crashed.